Hey guys, in this video we're going to be covering target 3C.1. So our learning objective is being able to substitute A, B, and C into the quadratic formula by using the standard form of the quadratic equation to identify what A, B, and C are. So this whole section we are going to be using the quadratic formula, which means it has to be in standard form. So hopefully we remember that standard form is in the form ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0. So this is what's called standard form, and it has to be in that form before you can use the quadratic formula. So it must be in this form. So again, must be in this form. Okay, it has to be in standard form before we can even start to solve it. Once it's in standard form, then we can use the quadratic equation, which says that x equals the opposite of b plus or minus square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. So once we have that quadratic formula, we can substitute the variables that we need for where they need to go, right? So step number 1, identify what A, B, and C are. A, B, and C is referencing whatever that A was in standard form, whatever that B was in front of the x, and whatever that constant was. So that A, B, C is how we identify it. Next step is plug in A, B, and C into the quadratic formula. Step number 3 is, well, simplify it and solve. For this video, though, all we're going to be doing is practicing identifying as well as just substituting it in. So you don't have to worry about the solving yet. That's going to be in the next video. But looking at these terms, again, very first step is making sure that it is in standard form. So we have to be in standard form first. Standard form has the ax squared, then the x, then the constant. So I already have my standard form for number 1, right? It's already in order. So I'm going to see that 2. I'm going to bring it down here. That's my a value. I do not need the x squared. I just need the coefficient. So again, coefficients only. Right? I don't need the variable. B is whatever's in front of the x. So that's going to be my 5. And C is whatever does not have a variable, which is 8. Alright, looking at number 2, am I in standard form? No, I'm not. So I want to rearrange this in order, keeping its original sign. So the x squared term comes first. So I'm going to bring over, just kind of rearrange it. So it's a positive 3x squared. That's gone. And then my x comes next, so that's going to be a positive 6x. That's gone. And then I can't forget to write my negative b. I did not change any of the signs. I did not move anything over. Everything's on the left side, so those signs all stay the same. Now I can go ahead and identify my A, B, and C. A is whatever in front of the x squared. That's 3. B is whatever in front of the x. That's a 6. And C is whatever is by itself. Please make sure you keep that sign. So it's a negative 8. Remember to keep the signs, kind of just a reminder, right? Keep signs. Just like if A and B had a negative, you would keep those signs as well. Alright, looking at number 3, everything's on the left side, but it is out of order again. So I'm going to go ahead and put that in order, bringing my x squared term first, then my x value, and then my constant. Still all equal to 0, and then I can identify what A, B, and C are. A is 6, B is 2, and C is 5. Number 4, everything is in order already, all on the same side, so I can just go ahead and identify what A, B, and C are. Remember, anytime you have a variable that does not have a coefficient visible, it is a 1. So that's a 1 and that's a 1. So when I write my variables, A is a negative 1. So A is a negative 1. B is a negative 1. B is a negative 1. And C is also a negative 7. Right? Keep all those signs. For number 5, we have to rearrange this just a little bit because it's not in order, right? We have multiple terms on both sides, and I have to have this in standard form. So what you have to do is you have to get things over to the other side and combine like terms. So I want the right side to equal a 0. So again, you notice that this is not equal to 0. So I want to make it equal to 0. So I'm going to do the opposite operation, and I'm going to subtract 4x. And I'm going to line that up with its like term. X and x are like terms. Right? So when I subtract that over, that goes over to the other side. I also have to make sure that this 2 gets moved over by doing the opposite operation, which is add 2. Right? We're subtracting it, so the opposite is a negative. The opposite of a negative is a positive, so I'm going to add 2. And now we see that some of these terms cancel out and we're left with our quadratic in standard form. So there's no other x squareds, right? So this is just going to be my x squared. I have a negative 2x minus 4x is a negative 6x, right? These get combined together because they are like terms. 7 plus 2 also are like terms, so 7 plus 2 is 9 equals 4x minus 4x is 0. Negative 2 plus 2 is also 0, and that's exactly what I wanted. I needed that term to be equal to 0. All right, now I can go ahead and identify my A, B, and C. So A is whatever's in front of the x squared, which is a 1. B is whatever's in front of the x, negative 6. And C is whatever is in front of there, and I forgot my positive sign, so it should be a plus sign. Alright, looking at number 6, again, it's not equal to 0. So we have to make it equal to 0 by rearranging some of the terms. Right, so not equal to 0. I want to move everything over to the side that has the x squared. I see it's on the left side, so I'm going to move that 8x over by doing the opposite operation, right? It's a positive, so I need to subtract it. I also need to get rid of that subtracting 3. And the opposite of subtracting 3 is adding 3. Again, I'm going to line it up under its like term. And we start seeing then that our quadratic is going to be in standard form. So x squared negative 6 and a negative 8 is going to be a negative 14. Negative 8 and a positive 3 is a negative 5, now equal to 0. Identify my A, B, and C. A is going to be a positive 1, B is going to be a negative 14, and C is going to be a negative 5. Alright, so that's just identifying A, B, and C. Some things to remember, has to be in standard form before you can even identify anything. And once everything is in standard form, then you keep its original sign, A, B, and C. Once it's in standard form. All right, looking at this next one. It says we have to plug in A, B, and C into the quadratic formula. So what to remember is, well, what is the quadratic formula? So we're always going to start off with writing that. And the quadratic formula is x equals opposite of b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac. Notice you're multiplying 4 times a times c, and then the whole thing is over 2 times a. Alright, so what ours is going to look like, we already have our a, b, and c. We are literally just plugging in what each variable is, right? So if I have this a equals 3, that means that anytime I see an a, I'm going to put a 3. Likewise, when I see a b, I have to substitute a b. Be very careful with the b's, because if it's a negative, notice that the original equation is already negative, so you still have to substitute the negative. Don't think that the negative that our answer is takes place of the one that's in the equation. So you still have to substitute all of that in. Alright, so let's substitute. x is going to equal, bring down that negative sign, and then we substitute b in. So I always use parentheses, plus or minus, draw my square root sign, put b in parentheses, don't forget to square it, minus 4. We're going to have double parentheses here for both a and c. So a was a 3, b was a 5. Everything is all over 2 times a. So again, just so that you can see those colors of exactly where I substituted it in. A was my 3, B was my -2. Again, be very careful with those double negatives. And C was 5. Alright, so if you need to highlight it, feel free to highlight. You do not need to, but it does help visually see what is going on. Alright, so looking at number 2, I have A equaling a -6, B equaling a +3, and C equals 10. So just like we were doing above, we have to substitute everything in. So I already have the quadratic equation there on the first example, so I'm not going to rewrite it. If you feel like you need to, you may. Alright, I'm going to start substituting. So x is equal to opposite of b. B was 3, plus or minus square root of b squared. So I'm going to put 3 in parentheses and I'm going to square it, minus 4 times a, which is a -6, times c, which is 10. And again, all of that is under the square root, so make sure that everything is underneath that square root sign, all over 2 times a. Alright, so then we start seeing that that's a value. Whatever a was goes where a belongs. Wherever b was goes where b belongs. And wherever c was is where c. Alright, looking at number 3, check to make sure it's in standard form. It is, so let's identify our a, b, and c. So a is going to be 2, b is going to equal 4, and c is going to equal 8. The reason why I can identify those right away is because it's already in standard form. So already in standard form. So I don't have to worry about moving anything over. So now I can just identify, already identified my A, B, and C. Now I can just go ahead and substitute what each variable is. Remember, this is my A, this is my B, and this is my C. So still plugging it into that same equation that we were working on, our quadratic equation, nothing's changed. So opposite of B, plus or minus square root of b squared minus 4ac. So plug in a 2 for a, plug in an 8 for c, all over 2 times a. If you want to see where I substituted our a's in, where I substituted the b's in, and where I substituted the c. Alright, that's all we have to do. If it just says substitute, that's all you have to do. Number 4, it is not in standard form. I have multiple terms on each side, and I have to get equal to a 0. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to move my terms where my x squared term is. So I'm going to move this 2x by doing the inverse operation. It is a positive, so I must subtract it. I also have to get rid of that positive 3. If I'm adding it, the opposite is to subtract it over to the other side. Alright, so now what I'm left with is 3x squared. A -5 and a -2x is going to be a -7x. -9 and a -3 is going to be a -12 equals to 0. Now it's in standard form. Now I can go ahead and state my a, b, and c. Right, so a is now equal to 3. B is now equal to a -7. Keep that sign. C is also going to be equal to a -12. Keep that sign as well. Alright, now we can identify our, since we identified them, we can go ahead and just substitute them into our equation. So, x equals a opposite of b, don't forget, you use parentheses, plus minus square root b squared minus 4 times a times c. Please use parentheses because eventually when we do solve, it's going to save us a lot of errors if we use parentheses now. All times R2a. Alright, so this is my A, this is my A. Again, if you don't need a highlight, that's okay. And that brings us to the end of this video. And you are now able to work on 3C.1. Alright, good luck, guys. And again, use parentheses. Be careful with those signs. And also always make sure that it is in standard form. Okay, good luck.